Are we live? Oh, shit. All right. Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025. And we got a couple weeks until the CrossFit Games and Monster Games coming up this week, which we're going to preview tomorrow. We'll have Jason Ansley on, the competition organizer, to give us a little preview. We'll have some picks for that field. But today, we got two things that actually have been working on organizing for a lot of this season, I would say. And one of those is something that we posted yesterday, which has the rankings of kind of the biggest competitions that we've seen so far this year, which got some interesting feedback and comments yesterday. And then we also have the top 100 men and women rankings in the world, sort of halfway through the calendar year. There's a lot of athletes that are competing in many different parts of the season or not in the season at all that we're used to. And we've been trying to do the best we can to keep a pulse on the global landscape of athletes who are competing as individuals this year. And I did my best to rank them up to 100. Last year we did a top 200, and I felt like there wasn't really enough information and data. And while there were this year several athletes that I didn't include in the top 100 that were considered, I do think it's a pretty good representation of who is competing and who's out there in the competitive scene. If you're just, and the interesting thing about today's show is basically we have used Apollo's rankings for the first part, and then we're kind of contrasting that with Apollo's ranking for the second part. But we're going to start with the post we put up yesterday. PC spent a lot of time on that, making it look really nice. And yet we were told it's the worst graphics we've ever seen. Damn. But no, it's beautiful post here. I really like the selection that you made for the people on the front of the cover, because you have obviously 2 men, 2 women, 2 sort of veterans, 2 up-and-comers that are already established, and then also 1 athlete on the men's side who's only doing the WFP season, 1 athlete on the female side who's only doing the game season, and the other 2, and Jason and Alex, who are planning to do both. So good representation of what this is all about. People have been have their preferences, I think, based on not data about what they want to watch and why they want to watch it. One thing that we've been pushing all year is that there are more opportunities for you, if you're a fan of competitive fitness, to watch the best athletes compete across many competitive outlets this year than there's ever really been. And that is basically because of the introduction of WFP, which guarantees 3 times a year that we'll see those athletes compete. Most of them that have tried also have made it to the CrossFit Games, so that'll be a 4th time. And then we'll also have the Rogue Invitational at some point down the line that will also fit in well with this narrative here. I actually reached out to Andrew to ask him why he said these graphics were so bad, because I think that they're pretty straightforward. This is a direct pull from Apollo's rankings, and Apollo's rankings, just if you're not familiar with them, are a 2-year look back at all of the competitive performance that the athletes have done or had a chance to do. And we've entered more, Barkley has entered more competitions into this database than any other database system in the world. And we try to select ones that are relevant, meaning that they have athletes that are already established, and then in many cases also athletes that are coming up in those regions, which a lot of times gives data points earlier in their career before they end up making it to the big stage. And it's pretty simple here. There's 8 numbers on the screen. They have the average ranking of 3 of the strongest fields that we've seen already this season. That's going to be WFP in Indianapolis, the CrossFit Games, which is about to happen in a couple of weeks, and then WFP Mesa, which just finished up their qualifier. So we know the 10 athletes that will join the 20 signed athletes. There's a little nuance there, but it doesn't really matter. And in each of these cases, there was sort of a big outlier in terms of one. This is the men's field, but in terms of one athlete whose ranking just isn't on par with the rest of the division. So that's what the Olympic filtering is. We took out the highest and lowest athlete from each field to give kind of a closer look at maybe what the actual field represents. And you can see there that, the WFP fields coming with a higher ranking than the CrossFit Games fields, and that for definitely the first time in the history of the games, that bottom line is that the top 30 ranked athletes in the world who are not competing at the CrossFit Games is basically the same average rank as those that are. And Patrick, I'll kind of open up to you here because I've just been talking for this 5 minutes. But there's a reoccurring sentiment in the comments, and granted, it's from a lot of the predictable usernames that we would see in comments like this, but it's more or less suggesting of the fact that the CrossFit Games births, the 30 athletes that are competing there, have earned them in competition this year, and that the WFP is just free handouts. My perspective is that those invites for the first year, contracts for the first year, were earned through performance across a career that spans a couple of years to a decade plus in some of the athletes' cases. And so using that term earned to only apply to the CrossFit Games is probably not that just or relevant here.
I mean, I could definitely see, like, obviously there's a lot of CrossFit Games, loyalists, and that's great. I mean, we're not saying one is better than the other. We're just putting the data out there for people to see, and base off this particular ranking system, and in terms of, in terms of like, you know, do these signed athletes from WFT truly earn it? 100% they've earned it. I mean, that's what being a professional. I mean, you earn a contract. That's how like NFL players earn bonuses. They earned it by the work they've done previous to that season. I mean, you look at any sport that is a contracted sport, their contract is based on what they earn. So people are like, oh, they didn't earn it to get those original contracts. You got to start somewhere, but in actuality, they did. Now we don't know how they earned it. I mean, WFP has certain criteria they use, whether it be accolades, social media presence, whatever. I mean, there's always that criticism when it comes to contracts. I mean, I criticize the Cardinals all the time whenever they either underspend or don't spend enough money on somebody. I mean, the amount of money they've spent on Wilson Contreras to replace Yadier Molina. I mean, it's ridiculous. He paid all this money, $40 million a year for a 250 hitter that hits 18 home runs and drives in 70 RBI and doesn't play catcher. I mean, there's my criticism, but he earned it, based on what he did the prior years when he was with the Cubs. So that's just how it is when it comes to these athletes. And the thing is, at the end of this season, the 2026 athletes, the athletes in 2026 that get their pro cards from WFP would have earned their pro card, just like whoever wins the CrossFit game has earned a title of fittest on earth.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to say it. And at the end of the day, we're not. This is just a straight data pull. Like we were curious. We don't know who is gonna do the WFP qualifiers before the season starts. Now they've both happened. We see the athletes who've qualified, and it's pretty impressive list of athletes that signed up. We talked about this when we were kind of comparing it to the Beat Bajent scenario, is that the group of athletes who's competing for those challenger spots in the WFP season is a pretty elite group. They're joining a very elite group of signed pros, and so it's not surprising to see a strong field there. The CrossFit Games roster is also strong, but there's definitely some people missing from that. And as far as this question goes, a lot. I think T-Bird answered you. Oh, yeah, there's a lot of athletes that are doing both, especially on the men's side. And at the article that Patrick was going to pull up earlier, we kind of highlighted some of the big differences between the men's and women's field, but also just the general takeaways from this study overall. Yeah, so let's take a look at the women's statistics real quick. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this. I thought it was an interesting study. People have been asking these questions, and so we sort of put them on paper here, using really the most comprehensive data that we can. And then for the women's field, we see something similar. In both cases, the fields in Mesa are the strongest fields for the men and women. And then in terms of the CrossFit Games, well, what happened to the viewing size there? Why did the viewing size get so small?
Oh, I have no idea.
I can pull it up over here.
Yeah, there it is.
In terms of the CrossFit Games, there's just less women that are at the top of the rankings that are competing, but I don't think it has to do with anything other than, or in many cases, just circumstance of athletes like Emily Rolfe, Alex Kazan, Gabby Magala, who are all still high on those rankings that are just unable to compete right now. And when you take out like 3 of the top 10 ranked athletes like that due to injury, obviously it's going to skew it one way. You also have a few athletes on the women's side that have just chosen not to compete in either this year, in Elisa Fuliano and Karen Freyova, and also Jamie Simmons, who did do the WFP qualifiers. She may show up in Arizona, but otherwise she hasn't competed in these things that are obviously very good. So there's just some women that have made some differences. But the thing that I really wanted to narrow in on from this conversation, and I told Andrew this the other day, I watched and we'll have a chance to talk about this when we get to the top 100s as well, but I watched his video on when he spent some time with Dallin Pepper and Jason Hopper down in Florida. And although the first 2 or 3 minutes were a little weird and somewhat difficult to get through, by the end of that video, it was the first video that I'd watched that actually got me excited for the CrossFit Games this year. And, I think what the men in particular have been able to do at the top of this sport is something that I will admit I've had a hard time doing. I think they have dissociated themselves from any of the politics. They don't really care that Dave Castro is running the CrossFit Games. They don't care that Will Morad is running the WFP. They see an opportunity to compete, and they want to compete and show people that they're the best. Sorry about that barking. They see an opportunity to compete, and they want to show people that they're the best any opportunity that they have to do it. And when you heard the interviews with Jason at the end of that segment, he's saying, like, what he's saying is how I feel all of the men are approaching this upcoming stretch of season between the games, WFP, Rogue, and WFP finals. I think at all 4 of those competitions, you're going to see basically the top 10. The only exception is Fikowski, who's still ranked in the top 10 and not competing. The rest of the top men are signing up, showing up, and competing with the intention to win multiple times this year. And I'll break it down a little bit more when we get to the top 100 men's rankings, but it's a very compelling top 10 on the men's side, and we get a ton of chances to see them compete, and I think that's amazing.
I concur.
There's a bunch of comments. They're pretty good comments. Appreciate you guys weighing in on those. Let me see here if we can address some of them. We'll hold off on the Amy Kringle one until we get to the rankings. What is this? I'm single. Should the winner of the WFP and Games not be the same people, which is seen as a truer trust of fitness? I think this is a great question. I think on the women's side, we're going to see different winners because Tia's probably going to win the games and she's not in the mix for the WFP. But on the men's side, this is going to be super interesting to see how it plays out. I'd even throw Rogue in the equation there. I mean, the reality is over the course of 3 days at the CrossFit Games, you're going to get probably 9 or 10 workouts and a winner. It'll be the smallest number of individual events and days competing in a long time at the CrossFit Games, but it will definitely test the athletes in a very stout way in terms of their ability to recover from doing a series of very difficult tests that Dave will design back to back to back, day after day. I still think that you'll get the effect of the fittest, which means not just the best on the floor, but also the ability to last the weekend, really start to rise and separate on Sunday. In terms of Rogue, it'll be very similar to what it's been, which is actually quite similar to the CrossFit Games in terms of 3 days, 9 to 10 events, 8 to 10 events, something like that, just a slightly smaller field. And we'll have to see how their qualifying process goes this year because there's some variables that haven't been in the mix. As far as the WFP, I think it's actually the most interesting one of the 3 to talk about because there is a narrative that the athletes aren't showing up with the same intensity to compete at the tour stops as they would at the CrossFit Games, possibly at Rogue, and probably at the finals as well, where there's a lot more on the line, and how to really assess that. But when you look at the totality of the season, Will Morad has said that there are 6, 6, and 9 workouts, which is 21 in total, to 20 signed athletes, at least on the men's side, and 18 that remain on the women's side, well, 17 since Haley missed the first tour stop. They're competing in all of them. Most of the challengers / pro qualifiers are returners and will show up in the pro division at 2, if not 3 of the total stops this year, meaning that you'll actually have what I consider to be the most robust test over time of best athletes doing challenging workouts on a legitimate field of play over a season. Now, there's some things that are maybe a little bit lost there, like we talked about with the recoverability being critical on the CrossFit Games side of things, but that will show its head more so at the finals than it will at the tour stops, where you basically have 2 regional or semifinal style competitions, which is also not uncommon to see at something like a Wadapalooza, where you have, basically 2 workouts a day, maybe 3, and therefore you can see kind of a more premium on intensity. Personally, I think that both of those are important to assess. And so I would say that comprehensively, the fact that the fields are stronger, there's more tests, and they're kind of testing a little bit different things at the tour stops compared to the finals, that I would say that winning the World Fitness Project is a more challenging task overall, or more comprehensive reflection of fitness than the CrossFit Games this year. But what we've always said about the CrossFit Games in the past is that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Everyone who's showing up to the games is showing up in their absolute peak condition. And that is still something that definitely tilts CrossFit's way.
Can you? I'm sorry, am I muted still?
No.
Oh, can you talk about, before we move on from this? Can you talk about the outliers, the Olympic, the what was it called? The filtering, and why we did that?
Yeah, I mentioned it just briefly at the start, but this last page here has it shows the top and bottom ranked athlete in each field. This is like if you watch, gymnastics, diving, anything that's on like a scoring basis. This is why they're called Olympic filtering. They drop the top score and the bottom score. And in this case, you can just kind of look and see at the men here, a 700 ranked athlete in a field that's averaging 30th ranking in the world otherwise is such a massive outlier. But if you're going to drop the bottom, you got to drop the top. You see something similar in the Mesa field with there's no outlier as big as Danny Camacho was in Indianapolis. And quite frankly, his performances on the field of play reflected that. He's never competed in a field like that before, and he got last there. But Julius Kaiser is the outlier for Mesa, having bumped up from the challenger to the pro field there. And on the women's side, you have, I think, the biggest outlier at the CrossFit Games stop, which is Maria Camila Quintero at 241. And her ranking's that low because she primarily competes in team competitions. So whether it's for lack of experience or doing team instead of individual in the past, we do have a couple athletes, even in the case of Emily Rethwell, who has also done more team competitions than individuals in the last couple of seasons. So we just decided we still show you the raw numbers, but when you drop the highest and lowest, I think it's a little bit more accurate representation of what the general makeup of the field is, for better or worse. Let's see here. A couple other dense updates. This will look very different after the games and after athletes pull out for Tour 2. Of course, at the CrossFit Games every year, there are athletes that get injured and withdraw. Sometimes that number is small. Sometimes it's very high. It's oftentimes different on the men's and women's field. Of course, we hope that none of that is the case all the time, but certainly that could change. There's still, who knows, a potential between now and the CrossFit Games that someone doesn't show up for competition for any number of reasons. These are just a look at what we know as of now. And of course, we can make amendments as we need to. Let's see. What is this? Tyler Watkins. WFP strength of field is high for the pros. You bought them. Now run the semi-pro divisions. There'll be a dramatic drop-off when compared to something like a lower-ranked semi. Oh, so I think he's talking about the challenger field there. Yeah, I just kept it at the pro field because that's the same number of athletes who are competing at the CrossFit Games. So I felt like that would be uh, pretty good. Um, yeah, I mean, like comments like this, like I said, I think the athletes who are showing up for WFP are probably less angry about anything than the people who are making those types of comments. They just want to compete. They see an opportunity to compete. This type of season, as Will has said, is something that athletes have been talking about for a long time, and now there's a chance for it to do it. So, a couple of the comments that are related to the top 100 will wait. Free tickets on the floor to CrossFit Games or WFP. I wonder what people would choose. Um, I don't know. Buy them both, and put them up for auction. And let's see.
Um, yeah, I mean, I know the tickets on the rogue floor were really nice.
Are there anything else that you think we need to address with the top 30s here? I mean, again, basically, this was just, I think people have been wondering, speculating, whatever. And this is just a snapshot, middle of July, of what the fields potentially look like, mostly to reinforce the fact that there's a lot of opportunities to see great fields of athletes compete this year.
Yeah. I do want to bring up the point, like I said, this is why Barkley. This is one of the reasons and cool things you can do with Barkley's rankings. So if you head over to Apollo Performance Analytics, all this is available, and this is all that stuff that that Barkley's been compiling. It's, I mean, 5 years worth of data essentially, and it's still building as we got more competitions coming in this offseason. And obviously, the games will be a big it will be a big part of the new rankings and stuff like that. But yeah, head on over there. Obviously, thanks to Barkley for putting that stuff out there, because it gives us an idea of what the strength of field looks like. Instead of us just making assumptions, it's based off of analytical data. Now, people can say like screw computers, or the computer doesn't know what it's talking about, and more often than not, the computers are usually they can't predict, but they can create models where you can kind of just take a look at some stuff like this. So, but no, that's all.
Oh, one more comment here from Johnny that I'll address. Some athletes are there to compete. Others, like Pat and Laura, he specifically references, I think, are there because they don't want to support CrossFit. I think that the use of the word CrossFit is something that you need to be careful with. I think that if you ask Pat Vellner and Laura Horvath, and in fact, if you listen to the interview that Kate and Mesa did with Christoph, he reflects some of this in the way that he speaks about their history of coming up in the CrossFit space, that they don't have a negative feeling about CrossFit as a lifestyle, methodology, a training program, etc. They are, I don't want to speak for them, but we can make some assumptions, not impressed with the way that Dave Castro and his team has handled things last year and in previous years. And this year, they do have a competitive outlet that is relevant in terms of a way to compete, and they've chosen to pursue that. I think that that's a huge reason why Will, who again has been involved in those conversations for years, especially with someone like Pat, who's been competing for just about as long as he has, and knows that there's athletes out there that are not happy with the way that the CrossFit Games team has run, and that's their prerogative to feel that way. There is another opportunity to compete, and I can understand if people are frustrated with that, but I think that it's a little bit silly to condemn them for that choice. You hear people basically say like, I respect the athletes' decisions to compete or not to compete last year, and now this year suddenly that attitude isn't necessarily there. You would think if they were both that excited to compete that their performance would have reflected that at WFP event one. Yeah, I mean, I see Dents. How did Pat do on the first tour set? He must have stopped doing CrossFit, started doing functional fitness. I think that's a little bit harsh. He had a bad competition. Pat had the worst competition result of his competitive career. I think that's probably pissed him off, and we're going to see if he's able to improve upon that in Arizona. And then ultimately, I think at the finals would be and maybe Rogue, if he gets an invite or qualification, would be a better indication of that for a few reasons. But yeah, I mean, Laura had something happen to her that didn't that usually doesn't happen in the first event. There was a lot. I mean, Seth Page actually did a great job talking about this in the WFP review show, that there were a lot of movements that favored Daniel Brandon at the first tour stop with just the demand on overhead. And we know that Pat's overhead position is basically his worst thing in CrossFit outside of swimming. So there's there's also that to consider, and that is potentially an argument towards the longevity of the season and the total number of tests. So let's see how Pat does in terms of rebounding from that.
So moving on to do you want to move on to the women's top 100?
Yeah, we can do that. A lot of comments here. Just want to see if there's any sort of new stuff.
Too far biased, Brian.
Oh, Mr. Tell. Too bad you lost credibility. I mean, look,
it's not even your data. It's biased that you grab data from somebody else who's not, who everyone would say is unbiased. It's just so funny. It really is. Like, yeah, people are just so blinded by just, it's just stupid.
Well, and I made a reference, or I alluded to it earlier on in the comments of this post. Most of the people commenting on this post are the predictable, are the predictable names that you would see in the comment sections. And we know what their narrative is, and we know what they're trying to sell and not sell, and promote and not promote, and that's okay. This narrative, the one that I'm talking on here, too much against CrossFit, I don't know. I'm trying to be fairly objective. I mean, I can't speak for any or all of the athletes, but I think it's pretty obvious if you study the history of the games that there are a lot of athletes throughout the history that have been very frustrated with Dave Castro, very frustrated with the way that they interact with athletes, treat them, consider them. Obviously, there's always been the best athletes in the world that have signed up and showed up anyway. So they obviously, they haven't cared enough to boycott it, with a few exceptions. And this year is one of those. And I think it's understandable. I'm not saying that it's, I don't care to say that it's the right or the wrong decision for the athletes. That's up to them. This is just data. And if you don't like the way that I'm talking about it, that's okay. I mean, I'm not expecting everyone to.
Sorry. Everyone love everyone. But Ryan, yeah, that is subjective, yes, but there's only one. That's the only data out there currently. And again, like I said, I really highly stress you guys head over to Barkley's website and check it out. It's pretty cool. He's doing a great with it. Hopefully, he upgraded that server. I know that he's having some times because of all the information he has in there. So, yeah. So let's just jump into it. Johnny says here he's the most knowledgeable, articulate. Most analysts don't even know 100 athletes, and that's true. There probably isn't that many out there. I mean, there's a handful. I mean, it's a very niche sport. We say that a lot. It's a very, and to be an analyst is a very niche in this as well. And there's only like I said, a handful that know all this. So, but
well, and I obviously appreciate that comment, and I appreciate this this comment to an extent too. But look, like I made a decision a couple years ago to do something that was pretty difficult, and to go on the road full time and try to make a meaningful living by traveling to and covering competitions all over the world. There are some things about that are super challenging and difficult to do, and it's it's not easy. But I do think that it puts me in a position that's different than most of the analysts that you guys would be referring to, because I've had a chance to see all of these athletes compete in person, which to me is a very different experience than watching them online. I've had a chance to talk to them, get to know them, understand where they've come from. That doesn't make these assessments perfect, but it is a touch point that very few to no people have had with this many athletes before. And it's come at a cost, personally and financially, but I wouldn't change it for anything. It's it's resulted in meeting communities and individuals that I never imagined that I would. So, uh, Peter, what's up, brother? I'm not sure the data stacks up. The games have a qualification system that filters where WV paid for the strength of field, which is valued on a strength based off of the game season, the Rogue Invitational, and a few other factors. I'll just add that in there. But we talked about this at the start, that certainly those athletes have earned something through competition. WFP had to start somewhere. You can say they bought the athletes all you want. Okay, now is their chance to back it up. Colton, I think, has the correct attitude on this. He wants to come out there and show them that they made a mistake. The only way to do that is through competition. And at the end of the year, the athletes who earn it through competition. Someone said maybe Pat will get cut. Maybe he will. He has to decide how much he wants to fight for that and then test himself against a very, very talented men's field that we're going to look to. Oh, okay. Nothing negative about WFP. Lots of negative things about CrossFit Games. Isn't it relevant? Sure, but we have to consider the variables. I mean, WFP is in the middle of their inaugural season. Um, and yeah, they've made some mistakes and they're bound to make some mistakes, but let's see how they learn from those and correct them over the rest of the season and then going into next year. Whereas CrossFit is almost 20 years into this thing and there's still mistakes being made that were made 15, 17 years ago, 5 years ago, last year, 3 years ago, whatever. So it's a different evaluation, and I know that there's a group of people that are measuring the WFP as if they've existed for 20 years, and that's a really harsh measuring stick, and that's their prerogative to do it. Um, you know, of course, I am working for WFP. I've been critical of CrossFit when I've been working for them before, but I want to give WFP more of a chance to see through one season before I speak, too harshly about any of the things that they're figuring out. Hold on, PC.
Huh?
Go ahead now.
Oh,
Go
I do
ahead.
want to comment on this. Words matter always. So everything Brian has said out of his mouth about the CrossFit Games has been negative. I do recall us covering a lot, previewing semifinals, doing rankings. We traveled. We covered 2 semifinals. We each did a broadcast. And yeah, I mean, anything negative you said, it hasn't been towards the games. It's been towards the people running the game, and people need there's a separation there, and so I just think it's great. I think how people paint this narrative, that you just hate the games and everything you said about the games has been negative when it hasn't at all. And if they would listen or whatever, it's fine. I mean, it's again, you'll get criticized for you being biased, but it seems like people that have criticisms are often biased themselves. So
yeah,
but
and we're going to talk about the top 100 in the world here, and I think especially when you get to the top 10 men, hopefully you see some very positive things projecting towards the CrossFit Games and also the WFP and Rogue in the finals because they're all competing. All right, we'll start with the women. Top 100 rankings in the world. Trying my best to assess all of the athletes who compete everywhere and anywhere. Very difficult to do in some cases. Hopefully, this is a pretty good representation of the global landscape of women competing. Definitely going to be mostly recognized names at the top, and then for some of you, maybe some new stuff, new names popping in on the bottom. We're not going to talk about every athlete on the list. I've kind of sent a few to Patrick to focus in on. So we'll start at 100 and build our way towards the top. Yeah, and then on this section, I mean, look, if there's any specific athletes that you guys want to know a little bit about, you can. Patrick, where do you want to start?
Sorry, it should have went. There we go. Starting there.
Cool. Yeah, so if you see any athletes in the section we're talking about that you specifically want to know about or are curious about or want to give a shout out to, you can do it. Otherwise, we're going to have like 2 or 3 per page. And the first one I want to highlight is young athlete Elsie Larson, who competed at the Metcon Rush last weekend, but also placed second at the CrossFit Games as a teenager last season and 12th place at the Syndicate Crown semifinals. I think that she's a name that we're going to start to see emerging on the female side of things. That's sort of the next in line of these women that have been able to transition from the teenage into the open field pretty fluidly or naturally. Patrick, I'm not sure if you have anything additional to say about Elsie, but my first time seeing her live was at Metcon Rush, and she's fully committed to this, and it was, as with most of these young women, it was her poise in competition, in addition to the skills and the fitness, that really surprised and delighted me.
Yeah, I don't know too much about her, per se. So I mean, everything that I know is from what we saw at Metcon Rush. So she seems a very impressive, well poised. So I look forward to see her. I mean, for her to crack, like I said, last time you did this, you did 200, but now you dropped it down to 100. I mean, for you to be considered, for one person like you with your credentials and your knowledge, to bring someone top 100 women in the world at this point in the season, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I don't, and this is the case with many of these athletes here, is that their opportunities to compete against the top 20 or 30 in the world haven't really happened yet. And that's, the first opportunities that we see someone like that in a rogue field in Dubai, even in a WFP challenger division, let alone a pro division, or a full semifinal field that we didn't really have in person this year. We'll get a bigger or better idea of exactly where she stacks up. But I see a lot of potential in Elsie, and so especially I took note of her. I mean, if you just look at like the Syndicate Crown field, yes, it didn't have some of the biggest names from the East Coast, but there was still a lot of names from this list that are that were at that competition. She's finishing one in a couple spots behind women that I have quite a bit higher up on this list. So I think the potential's there. She's already had a success in the teenage division. The mindset is very good. She's got support to be able to pursue this full time. She's doing schooling online. So Elsie Larson's a young athlete coming up on the women's side that might be good to be aware of.
There's a woman on here that I've heard you talk about so much, especially in competitions and in Europe, specifically in the UK, is Connie Easby. Um, you know, I don't remember seeing her. She was, I think, in the top 200, but this year she breaks into the top 100. Why does she break into the top 100?
Yeah, I think she's actually on the next list here because she probably comes in between 75 and 80.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I jumped ahead.
Um, yeah, and there was a competition that we just briefly touched on a couple of weeks ago in the UK Championships. A few women from that competitive division are on this list, and Connie Easby is one of them. You may have seen her also at semifinals the last couple of years. She did both the French Throwdown and Wandland Fest this year, as well as the French Throwdown semifinals last year. She was top 20 in all of those. She just missed a podium in Marbella in the off season, and she just missed the podium at the UK Championships. I think she's young. She's 21 years old, but again, she's in a position where she's got a lot of support, and she's starting to get some of those relevant competition touches against stronger and stronger fields. So she's the type of athlete that I would be curious to see if she enters into the Wadapalooza field at some point. And then we'll see what the season looks like next year. But youngster out of the UK, a growing list of women in the UK that we've been talking about, who I think are notable and worthwhile being on this list.
Yeah. Um, there's a couple on this particular slide right here. Um, I mean, you have Miriam, who's obviously going to the games, has done really good in the Open. You've seen her, you saw her at semifinals last year, but you have her ranked pretty. I mean, is this just based off of? I mean, what's her ranking based off?
Yeah, I think Miriam Van Roer to me still needs to kind of earn it in live competition. She has shown to be exceptional in the online formats, and I would say that she's somewhat akin to um, maybe like Colton Mertens 3 years ago, where he could compete and make it to the games potentially, but you were never quite sure. And I feel like she needs a few more legitimate competitions. She's obviously going to get one this summer, and I'm and and let's see how she does. Uh, but right now, I think and actually, this can be said of a few women in this range of the leaderboard, that she's sort of like in the wings waiting. And until she goes to those big competitions and sort of breaks through once or twice, I think she's definitely within the top 100 in the world. I don't see her in the top 50 yet, but certainly has some potential.
Another woman that kind of sticks out to me, and I don't know much of, is Ella Price.
Yeah, Ella Price really caught my attention at Torian Pro this year. That's probably the trip that I took this year that I'm like most grateful for I've taken. She's now actually finished top 10 at that competition 2 years in a row. 10th last year, ninth this year. She was also fifth at Down Under Championship. She was 56th in the Open. Um, top 100 in the quarterfinals the year before that, when those were still going on. Again, she's pretty young. She's building up her strength. Um, and this is something that I write about in the article, is especially, I would say, in Oceania, it's a difficult region to know exactly how good the athletes are there compared to the rest of the world. We'll talk about it a little on the men's side too. There's a few athletes that have broken out and been able to compete internationally, but there's a bunch of them that only compete in Oceania and online. And Ella Price is one of those athletes from that region that I would love to see pursue, or get an opportunity to travel outside of Oceania and compete. Um, and until she does that, she won't be able to go much higher on this list. But comprehensively, what I saw from her in Torian Pro against what I consider to be a pretty solid top 10 on the women's side, all of those women are in this list somewhere, um, is something that's notable. So I think there's more depth in the women's field in Oceania than we've been able to see in the last 5 years, because they've had less spots, and those top spots are occupied by such beasts, basically. So yeah, a good athlete in Oceania. How good globally, I'm not sure, but I do think she's clearly inside this list.
Yeah, she was someone that you brought to my attention. Again, I just didn't know much about her, but it's just like that new generation. Oceania's kind of like reloading, but it feels like they've been doing that for a while. But especially with Carl Saunders no longer competing, and then you just never know what's going to go on with Tia. But it looks like she's leaving it in a good spot for the Oceania women.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of them that we could talk about here, but I think there's a lot of strength in Oceania. You'll see when we get towards the top of this list that I may have even a couple of the other women higher than most people would expect. Um, yeah, I was impressed with the depth of field there.
All right. Another name. Is there anyone else on this list of 20 athletes here? I did this in like segments of 20, that
Yeah, yeah.
that you want to discuss, or
I would like to give Taylor Howe just a shout out. I think that
Mhm.
she was a name that was relevant a few years ago. The last couple of years, not so much, and she's had a better season, her last 12 months. So it's cool to see her sort of back in the mix. Um, you know, and I think very very good kind of re-emergence or re-entrance into high level competition in Europe this year for Taylor Howe.
Yeah, I definitely been impressed by her this year. It's just like the level of competition. I mean, starting with Rogue, and it seems like she's really kind of like, I don't know, turned a corner. So it'll be really interested to see what she does this offseason. Obviously, I don't really know much about like the extent of her game season, what it looked like, but we do know she didn't do any WFP qualifiers. I imagine I mean, she'll probably give Rogue another shot, but I anticipate a big 2026 season for whatever she decides to do. And knowing her, she might do everything. You know.
Yeah, one other name, if you didn't follow our coverage of Turco Tumiopaiva, is Jasmine Van Arnhem. She won that competition. Prior to that, she's pretty much only competed in German-speaking competitions, Austria, Germany, etc. She did do the WFP qualifiers, so we'll see if she accepts invite and comes there. But she's got a lot of talent, and I hope that we get to see her in a bigger stage soon.
Yeah, definitely. I like that Maddie Fouts pick too. I mean, she's another person to keep an eye on too, right there behind Taylor Howe. So definitely a good mixture of young athletes, some that are not known as well. I mean, you got Miley Wade, who's going to be competing in the teenage, the teenage games. I mean,
I
it's
know.
you got Burgos here, who's currently in. Apparently, she just signed a deal with Nike. She's in Spain right, believe in Spain right now, part of that Nike Summit, the introduction of the new Metcon 10. So she's there. So big things in store for her. We've seen her quite a few times. She really looked like she belonged when we saw her at Wadland. So another teen graduate. So we're going to see a couple of those teen graduates.
Yep.
All right, we'll move on to the next 20.
Yeah, and one of the athletes on this group that a few of you have asked about, Julian, a while ago, why is Syria Meha so low? I would have put her in the top 30 after winning the affiliate semifinals. AHA, do you think Miriam and Syria could make waves in a lot of events at the games? And I think I might have missed it, but someone did respond to this, basically saying that the competitions that Syria's done haven't been of that caliber. Obviously, winning the online semifinals is very impressive because everyone more or less signed up for it, but it still is an online competition. Syria Meha, if you guys are not that familiar with her, is an athlete that Patrick and I have seen compete a ton. She's been in a lot of competitions that I've live streamed. She won the Eurasia Throwdown this year. She got second at Athens Throwdown. She won Fall Series Throwdown. She was fifth last year at the Belgrade Games. She was second at Alfred in 2023. And there's a bunch of competitions smaller than that she's done that aren't even in the Apollo database, which is okay. She did do the French Throwdown semifinals in 2024. She finished in the bottom 10 out of a field of 40 there. She had a good open showing of 25th. So online, she's great. In person, she has a lot of experience. She hasn't, we were sort of talking about with some of those other athletes, she hasn't shown the capacity to compete with these top 50 athletes in the world names that we're used to yet and beat them. That might change at the games, but just because it changed online isn't a reason for me to bump her any higher than this. And I would say that if not for that, she would have been more in that 60 to 80 range. So I definitely gave some credit to that, but I want to hold out and see how she does in the biggest live competition of her career a couple weeks from now.
Sure, she is too. I mean, when we interviewed her, the games wasn't. I don't think she realized how close she was to the games, and here she is. She finds herself in the games, kind of relatively unknown to majority of people, and it'll be interesting to see how she does when she gets to Albany. So I believe it's going to be her first trip to the U.S. I think, but I know her coach and her dad will be there, and those are two very important people in her life. So she's she's going to be surrounded by some people. So hopefully she doesn't get too nervous and she puts on a show.
Yeah, I mean, and if you, I guess the question about are they going to make waves at the games, I would say that Miriam's skill set is probably going to lend itself to the higher individual event finish. Like she could have potentially a top 3-5 finish in an event or two, depending on how they shake out. Whereas Syria may be the more consistent athlete. She might not have any top 7 finishes, but she may not have any bottom 5 finishes. So whereas Miriam may have a few of each of those.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've seen Miriam in person. I saw her at the IF3. Granted, it wasn't the greatest fit. I mean, Ella Wilkinson was in it, and a couple other athletes. But she looked really good. Looking at some of the workouts that Dave has put out so far, it's interesting to see how she'll do. It'll be interesting to see how Syria does as well. So, but those are two, I guess you want to call them the online competition warriors. But now they get to prove it in person. The thing is, they do have a lot of live competition experience. They just, like you said, not at that level. I mean, Miriam's competed at High Rocks at the highest level, so the lights aren't going to be a deal. The pressure is not really going to affect her at all. I don't think.
No, but one of the things that will be interesting is to see how they handle the volume and intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Dave has basically said that this is an old school games. Get ready to do a lot of volume in 3 days. There's not a ton of competitions that will throw that much volume at you in that short of a period of time. We know from the history of the games that the best athletes withstand that and show up stronger, fitter, and more well prepared on Sunday. And so for athletes like Miriam and Syria, that's one of the things that they're going to have to, they've hopefully been working on and preparing for, but doing it on game day is a different story. So, and we'll see it for the first time for both of them.
Hmm. Definitely. Another list, I mean, we go from someone like an unknown, like Syria, who not many people know, to someone that's really well known in this list. Also, another athlete that's actually in Spain for that Nike Summit, unveiling the Metcon 10. It's Sarah Sigmundsson.
Yes, and you and I had a pretty interesting conversation about
Yes,
Sarah
we did.
Sigmund's daughter a month or so ago when I first sent you my first version of this, and I had Sarah quite a bit lower. And actually, I think I could just give you a chance to explain a little bit of how you pushed back on me on that and how we ended up with her inside the top 50.
Yeah, you had her. I think anywhere around 80 or 100. But I asked you some of the names that you did, and you know, um, yeah, she did not win the South Africa or the Africa semifinal. But she won every event except for two, I believe. The last one, and then the running event. And the thing is, like in that running event, really, I mean, that pretty much kept her off the podium against, and it was nine, I believe, nine events, but her body held up, and she beat some, athletes that you normally would have, And then I also got to see her at Storm Games, which was her first real healthy competition back, and she competed in a field that included Matilda, Jamie Simmons, Seher Kaya, Luisa Marquez. I mean, there was a bunch of Evie Hollis, some well-known athletes, Andrea Solberg, Verena. I mean, she competed against that, and I believe she finished fourth or fifth. But it was
At the
really
storm
cool.
at the Storm game, she was fifth. Yeah, I mean, look, she's been competing. She,
Mhm.
15th in the Open. She's always done good in the Open. 30th online semis. She podiumed at the Africa. She was, the last chance qualifier didn't go so great, but basically, she can't run.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem. But her fitness in terms of Metcons, online style workouts, like you said in Africa, that don't have those limitations, she's really fit. If you can't run, obviously you're going to be limited, significantly against any serious test. But the fitness outside of that is pretty impressive when you actually strip it down.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when I talked to her at in Birmingham for the Fit Fest, I mean, she said she's not going anywhere. I mean, she said this is the healthiest she's felt in 3 or 4 years now, and she's not even healthy. She even admitted herself. It's like it takes reps now. It's like she has to relearn how to do a lot of things that she was used to doing, and then also dealing with her her ailment where she has a autoimmune disease. You know, so she has to manage that as well. So she's learning, and I thought what she did in South Africa, that long of a weekend, that many events. I think she's going to look back if she does make the games next year or competes at the high level, whether it be at Wadapalooza or WFP or Rogue in 2026. She's going to look back at this season in 2025, especially that semifinal where everyone thought she was going to win, where she didn't, but she thought she won personally. I think she's going to look back down. It's like that was a turning point, and I'm here. I'm here for this comeback. I mean, this is a comeback. We've seen a couple comebacks. Ricky's comeback has been amazing. I mean, but I think Sarah's it's just a different comeback that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, ironically fit. Do you think that she'll stage a considerable comeback? And you just heard Patrick say that's her intention. She's definitely trying. We see that the fitness shining through in the things she can do, and she's progressing in the right way. I think she's in a situation in her life where she's surrounded by people that are very much invested in the pursuit of that comeback and supporting her in the right ways. It seems like she's making reasonable decisions about how often to compete and where to take those chances. And I personally would say that it's like 50-50 if she's able to do it or not. And a lot of those variables are somewhat out of her control of how her body's going to respond. Obviously, this sport is very demanding on the body and the mind. It's very difficult to be good. She's as resilient as they come, but it's, honestly, it's a little bit like Taylor self. Like, the body has to come along too. And at some point his didn't, and he had to pursue something else. She's still fighting for that. And I'm hopeful, I think we all are, that it will result in something spectacular, but only kind of time will tell.
Yeah, definitely. I'm here for it though. Like I said, I think when that comeback's complete, I mean, she has fun out there. Just watching her, the smiles there, she's having fun. She knows she's an ambassador of the sport. That's why she enjoyed her time down in Africa. So it's going to be really fun. Um, let's move on. Is there any other women on this segment here? Obviously, a lot of familiar names. And then one of those teenagers, Reese Littlewoods, right there. Coming off that podium finish at Syndicate. And Trista Smith's up here too. So there's some just amazing athletes, both veteran and otherwise.
Yeah, no, let's move into the next list.
21 through 40.
Yeah, and the picture here is actually the first woman that I wanted to talk about in this grouping, which is Jen Muir. And Jen's, I got the privilege of training with her for a day over in Scotland last summer. It was very cool to get to know her, see where she trains, talk to her about how she's come up in the space. But if you just look at her results this year, she's starting, and even dating back to last year, she's starting to string together a variety of impressive performances and putting herself in relevant competition experiences, which is the reason why she's so high up on this list. If you haven't been following along, she was 15th at the European semifinals in 2023, 12th last year, 12th in affiliate this year. So she's and also 13th at Wildland Fest, which was a little different of a competition, but she's showing the capacity for consistency across those seasons. She's put herself in the Wadapalooza field. She had a top 20 finish there. She had a couple decent online finishes, 15th in the Open 2 years ago, 57th last year, which I wouldn't say she's built for the online portions, but she's fit enough. And she didn't make it in the pro field at WFP, but she won the challenger field, which pretty difficult field in its own regard. Now we'll actually get to see her in some competitions where we're going to find out if this ranking is good or not, because she's qualified for the games and she's made the WFP pro field. So the biggest opportunities for her career are coming up within a 1 month period where she's going to be back in the US competing.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought she was probably a year away, but she's done all the right things this season in terms of competitions and level. And for her to, we had that talk with Ella Wilkinson, and I had a conversation with her about, like, they had a stretch there was going to be like 3 or 4 weekends in a row where they're doing qualifiers and semifinals as well as WFP. And Jennifer, did amazing. Coming right off of did the online semifinal, didn't know it hadn't been finalized yet, and she did WFP, looked really good there. It really showed that she belonged there, which is very conversely like what we saw at Wadland Fest was we saw glimpses of it, but then what we saw at WFP was that was what we were expecting. And then a couple days later she hears that she makes the games, after the online semifinals have been finalized. So I'm really happy for her. I mean, just what a season's been for her. And now she's, not only does she has the games, but at the end of the month, at the end of August, she gets to compete with the same women. Most of the same women again at WFP and Mesa. So she qualified as a pro challenger, like you said. So
we weren't planning on talking about it specifically, but a couple shout outs for Kristen Holte here from Ironically Fit and AHA. And if you are paying attention to the team competition, Uda Lundikvam posted a video of doing synchro ring muscle ups with Kristen Holte, who is the alternate on their games team that qualified first overall. I don't know of anything other than that, but who knows? Maybe we will see her at the games on a team. And by the way, we're going to have a team's preview and ranking show coming up next week as well. Even though it hasn't gotten a ton of coverage, I think there's a ton of impressive team athletes and training camps / gyms that are heavily invested in that, and we want to give them some attention. The other athlete in this section that I did want to talk about was Sungyeon Choi. Got her pretty high here, 31st. Some could argue maybe that she should be a little higher based on the last times that we've seen her compete at the CrossFit Games, and also what she did in Wildland Fest, where she took 3rd place. She also went and won in the Far East Throwdown after that. She technically qualified twice for the games this year. But just a refresher that she was 24th last year, 26th in 2022. She was injured in 2023. And along with one performance from Seher Kaya, these are the best performances that we've ever seen from a woman who's representing the Asian continent. The fact that she went to Europe and competed that well in a pretty stacked field in Malaga is really what solidified me feeling confident putting her this high up on the list. And Patrick, I'm guessing that you are in agreement with this one.
Oh yeah, I mean, been a big fan of her. Obviously, I mean, it's the Asia region is that's my jam, and then I've been able to see her twice, in Korea, but then to see her, I've always wondered, like, these Asian athletes, these athletes who haven't really done, I mean, they're only going to get better if they need to compete with a better competition. You just can't sit there and just beat up on the local competition like she was doing. Now, granted, Seher Kaya, but they're only seeing each other once a year. But so she wasn't really getting a proper measurement, proper measure of how fit she was, especially in live competition. So, I was very impressed with her at Wildland. Obviously, she did a great job at in Korea. She's a rock star there. She's gonna, that workout, the program was very geared towards her in terms of, like, it favored her a lot of bar. I mean, shoot, every workout had a bar in it, and she's really good with the barbell. So I want to see what she does. I mean, she's really good at CrossFit. Now we get to see her at the highest level of CrossFit. She's not a specialist, but now we get to see that fitness and her finally being healthy and what it looks like at the end.
And this is also, I think, a good time to talk about, especially as we're going to get into this next list, that for certain athletes worldwide, the format of the WFP season doesn't make any sense this year. Sungyeon Choi was never going to be able to do those qualifiers, travel to the US and Europe 3 times, and hope for the best in that situation. The games path allowed her multiple opportunities to do that, and she did it. This is also very true for athletes in South America and Oceania. And that's one of the things that we've been saying is one of the main reasons we want to do this ranking is because not all the athletes have the same opportunity, but they're all competing somewhere. And this is, in my opinion, the best way we can kind of approximate what they've been doing leading into a very competitive stretch of the season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who else on this list did you want to speak about?
I don't know if let me see if I highlighted her on. I might not have highlighted her here, but I did want to just give a little nod to Emily DeRoy. I mentioned that overall I was really impressed with the field in Torian, and Emily in particular stood out to me there. This is the first real time that I've got her to see her compete healthy at an individual competition. She had a very similar performance 2 seasons prior, but she was injured going to the games, and so we didn't get to see it on the world stage. Last year, she competed on a team in a depleted field, and they won, which is great. But again, it's not the touch point that I wanted in terms of really understanding who she is as an individual athlete. I don't know if anyone really realized it, but she actually beat Gracie Walton at that competition, and it didn't seem like that was very possible until it happened. Gracie was solidly in the 3 spot behind Maddie and Tia, and everyone just expected that to be a tier above everyone else. But by the time the entirety of the test that was the Torian Pro this year finished, Emily DeRoy was right in that mix, and I'm rewarding her for that with this ranking here. I mean, we'll see how she does at the CrossFit Games, but I'm expecting to see a very different version of her than if you didn't watch Torian this year, or if you're not from Oceania, than you've ever seen of Emily DeRoy before. She was very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, when she made the games 2 years ago as a rookie, she was obviously dealing with some injuries, some back issues. So they see a healthy DeRoy. Even last year on the team, she wasn't 100%. You know, but she looked great. I mean, she looks the part. You look at her. I mean, she looks the part. And you know, it's kind of a shame. You know, there isn't swimming at the games this year, or you know, because her and Gracie Walton are some of the best swimmers. I would love to see how they match up with someone like Tina, who's also a really good swimmer too. But Emily has shown that she's more than a swimmer at that semifinal and past semifinals. But this year, she looked. I mean, I'm looking forward to see a healthy Emily DeRoy and what she does at the games.
Let's bump into the top 20 here. I think this is actually going to show 6 through 20 on the next slide. And few athletes we wanted to highlight, a few athletes that you guys have been asking about. And let's start with actually, where is she on here? How come I don't see her on this list?
Who's that?
Did I forget? There's no way I forgot her on here. Claudia Gluck.
Oh, that's a good question.
Did I forget her? There's no way. But I want to talk about her either way. She should
No,
be.
she was on. She's 23rd. Yeah, we're
She's
23rd.
23rd.
Yeah.
Okay, I just didn't see her there. That's because you formatted these differently than I did with the 25 and the 20s. But either way, Claudia Gluck. Yeah, I did want to talk about Claudia Gluck. A couple of people have mentioned her in the chat and how good she can do this time around. Obviously, there were some athletes missing from the CrossFit Games last year, but Claudia did quite well there, placing 12th as a rookie. The field is smaller. There's still some athletes missing on the top of the women's side, but I think that we can be kind of looking at a very similar trajectory for her against this field, which is flirting with that top 10 finish. And when we do get to that 6 through 20 mark, we're going to see like there's a difference in the athletes that are up in that part of the ranking because they've been able to sustain impressive performances at the competitions they show up at over a period of time. Claudia, she's been good in Europe. She's been good in Dubai. She was solid at the games last year. This year, very different feel that the whole thing will have, hopefully. So I'm excited to see if she can back that performance up. And I do think that she's a good one to keep an eye on this year as kind of maybe a sleeper pick to upset some of the familiar names in the top 10.
With her background gymnastics and just being a pretty good, just overall in fitness and CrossFit in general, and like Dave's saying that this is going to be more probably a very different games in terms of it's going to be traditional CrossFit a lot more than you're used to seeing. So I'm really excited to see that, and it bodes well for someone like Claudia Gluck if that indeed is the case. That one rep max back squat, maybe not so much, but you know.
I mean, look, if you're just looking at what he's shown so far, we had a heavy lift, we have a long grinder at the start. Neither of those are the perfect workouts for her, but there'll be plenty of stuff in between for her to shine. I think this is a good time to bring up this comment from AHA as we're getting into this, which is a lot of athletes who are competing at the games on the women's side. I find this year's women's field fascinating. So much newish blood and interesting potential home run hitters. Lucy Campbell can do a lot. Siri Amiram, who we just talked about, can disrupt. Olivia and Claudia can surprise. I thought it was a nice comment earlier in the show that wanted to bring it up here. In this section, I wanted to focus in on a few athletes. The first one I wanted to talk about is Abigail Domit. And I'll be curious to get your perspective on this also, Patrick. But I feel like Abby is maybe not one of the like household top 10 or 15 names that gets thrown around. I think she's one of the athletes that probably feels most slighted by not being invited to WFP. And we've talked about it previously that maybe at the time they were making those invites, her resume wasn't up to the standard of most of the athletes, if not all of the women that got those invites. But since that, which has been, this entire calendar year, she's been extremely impressive. And don't get me wrong, last year she won the West Coast semifinals, 15th at the games. Those were good, but 7th at Wadapalooza, top 50 in the Open, 2nd at Mayhem Classic, and now she's going to the games. And I just feel like Abigail is maybe an athlete who's ready to unseat sort of the stable of North American women that we've regularly seen in the top 10 in the last couple of years.
I would agree with that. I think she is. I think her resume is really good over the last couple of years. She just hasn't really matched it up with the games performance, but I think she's on the cusp of doing that, and I think this season you're going to see that in some form or some manner. I mean, she looked great. She looked great at the Super Scion, um, Abby Domit from Mayhem Classic. She looked amazing. I mean,
Do you know what this means?
let's see.
Abigail Stan. Kate, please provide clarification.
Maybe like no, Abby.
Anyway, I think Abby's coming into her own, coming into the prime of her career, and that we're going to see the best version that we've seen of her. Yes, is she a dark horse pick? I would say depending. I think her actually ranking in Apollos is higher than I have here. So she's been stringing together those impressive performances. I would guess she's one of the athletes that probably has been climbing the rankings the most. Oh, Stan means fan. Okay. Thank you,
Oh, gotcha. Good one.
guys. So yeah, Abigail Domit, potentially dark horse, potentially maybe not the most obvious pick for a top 10 finish at the games that could potentially do that. Obviously, if you take out the athletes that are in the top 10 here who aren't competing there, I would have her inside the top 10 for the games field. The next one I wanted to talk about is the woman we see on screen here, which is Emma Lawson. Regardless of any of the superfluous conversation that's gone about what athletes are doing that's good or bad in terms of CrossFit, I think that the decision that Emma Lawson made this year for herself was a smart decision. And she's been dealing with some stuff on or off the field of play, both physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever. And I think we saw Wadapalooza. She decided to do the team competition, not the individual or not the reps ahead. And that went well. And then she kind of decided with the WFP this year, I have the opportunity to know exactly when I'm competing and tailor my preparation for the year with that certainty. And for her, I think that was a really advantageous thing to have. She did, I would say for her standards, she did fine at the first WFP event, kept herself relevant in the mix. I feel like Emma's going to continue to show up more healthy, more prepared, and more competitive at each of the WFP events this year. I don't know if she'll, why I don't know for sure why she made that decision. I just think that with the variables that were in play for her personally and the options available competitively, it was a good decision that's going to allow us to see the version of Emma Lawson that I think we all want to see.
Yeah, and I think what it does to her it's almost like I mean, she's a teenager, just finished high school and all that stuff. It's her gap year. This is kind of like a gap year for her, where she can kind of she's got a new coach, got a new training camp, a new system. She left, I mean, the person that she knew for so long, that had been her coach since day one, is no longer doing that. So this is it's a lot for her. So I think what
Well,
she's
and
done.
in terms of the coaching stuff, from the experience that you and I have talking to coaches and athletes who make these transitions, it's not a clean cut formula. But a lot of times it takes a couple months to settle into a groove, a couple of competitions to settle into a groove, and that doesn't mean she can't do well. But I do feel like by the time we get to Copenhagen in December, that she'll be in a situation where we coaching situation, athlete situation, life situation, that we would hopefully see the version of Emma Lawson we saw 2 years ago at the games.
Yeah, and also if Hiller's video that he did with Ty Jenkins, she came down to, I believe, Missouri, and then trained with her, or he might have went down to, or no, he came down to Jacksonville, and he had an opportunity to train with her down there, and he said that she just looks like she's, yeah, just stacked, just not I'm not a bit surprised, but he's like, yeah, she's very fit right now, so which is good.
Well, you look, and she's been winning semifinals since 2022. Like, so, and she's been placing sixth at the games 2022 as well. Second in 2023. Like, we know her history is littered with impressive performances, top threes at tier 2 competitions, top 6, 7s at tier 1 competitions, and yeah, I think that we're kind of all in the same feeling here that she's pushing back in that direction. And of course, everyone, like, we always want to see the athletes at their best. I think we will get that by the end of the year from Emma.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we will too. And I'm interested to see like what she looks like with almost a full season under her belt with Bert.
The last woman on this section of the leaderboard that I wanted to key in on is Amy Kringle. And, I felt like I had a pretty good ranking up here in seventh. Maybe you'd removed the starred comment, or maybe why can't I see it? No, there it is. I hope Amy is number one. Of course, we know that this is Jake from Isle of Man, same place that she's from. I would say, Amy, obviously she had a great finish at WFP. When you look at her, like the trend of her competitive career recently, it's pushing in a great direction. She won down under last year after taking 13th at the games and 5th at semifinals. She had a top 15 open finish, top 10 online semifinal, podiums at the World Fitness Project, which up to this point in the season is the most competitive scene that we've had for athletes to compete at. And I think very similar to Abby Doment, she's not maybe a household top 10 name, but she could be moving in that direction. And I think we're going to, about this, find out whether or not she can consistently do that. But my feeling is that she can.
Oh, I think she does too. She has. I mean, you just where she where she. I mean, I remember the first time I saw her. One of the first times was at Dubai, which was that's almost 3 years ago, right, Brian?
What year did she do Dubai? It was 2022. Yeah, she got 16th that year.
Yeah, and just seeing her transform, and not just her body, but just like her skill level. Like this is a girl who was, very similar, like kind of where Sydney Wells are, and I kind of compare them, those two, because they're very endurance based athletes. But like ring muscle ups, gymnastics, they were kind of difficult for her. I mean, she was a runner. That's what she was known as. She was an endurance athlete. So the gymnastics took a little bit longer for her to get a hold of. But now she's having no issues with gymnastics at all. And so I can see Korea wins a fender and it's cracking me up. Yeah, I mean she's CrossFit Barbie. She's a CrossFit Disney prince.
Well, and you talked a lot about it at the beginning of the show, like the cool things that Barkley has built on Apollo that are easy to use, and you can just go look at her competition history and understand what I was talking about. Like the breadcrumbs are there. 16th that year at Dubai, 17th for 2022 and 2022 at Wadapalooza, 19th in the semifinal. Then it becomes 5th. Then she starts having some of the other finishes we talked about, and that's like that trajectory when you get towards the top of the sport that you love to see. She's putting herself in the mix. She's having middle pack finishes. She's moving up a little bit. She's moving up a little bit. And I think she's kind of poised now to potentially even push into the top 5 global conversation over the next 5 months. And a lot of the athletes that we talked about at the start of this list, they're 3 years behind that trend. They won't all move up that way, but a couple of them definitely could.
And I think she's the one that's taken advantage of it. And she's got a good team around her, a great coach, great training partners, great managers. I mean, she's doing all the right things. And she's more than just a pretty face, and she's more than the double S curve on Hiller's rankings of body types. What you see is completely functional, and I'm expecting big things from her at the games and WFP. I mean, I think she's gonna surprise some people at the games, even that first event. And Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what she does.
Let's look at the top 5. I don't want to spend a ton of time on each of these individually. I mean, all of these athletes have their own credentials. I think that, Daniel Brandon's who I have in 5th place. This was pretty tough. 5 through 10 is kind of a wash. I think that she's healthier than she's been in a while. We'll see how it goes with the coaching change, but I don't think it's going to be too big of an impact for her at the games. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that unless you want to add anything.
No, I mean, I'm okay with this. I mean, even with the coaching change, I mean, you're at that point in the season where it's all maintenance. I mean, she's you know tapering down anyways. So It'll be interesting to see the Knifer and Danielle Brandon dynamic. I think Knifer's a no nonsense guy. So, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I'm and I think it'll be a good thing for her. At least, I don't know if that relationship goes past the games, but she's someone that thrives in chaos. Uh, maybe not by choice, or sometimes by choice. It doesn't matter. But I think there's no denying. It's like Kotler said it himself. He's like he's never seen a pure athlete like Danielle Brandon. When she's healthy, she's one of the top athletes in the world, and she's one of those few athletes that can consistently beat Tia in at least one event. And if she's healthy, her back. I mean, I don't know how that back squat's going to be for her. Maybe that's just kind of. I don't see her. I mean, maybe that's just something where she's managing it, but at the game. But yeah, I
No,
have.
she's been doing this. She's been doing this for a while now. So that's just a matter of making smart decisions. When you see a 1 rep max back squat, like you have to understand, if you think back to the CrossFit Total, like going for a little bit too much can offset the entire weekend. Where is it worth it to roll the dice, depending on who you are as an athlete, is something that they have to assess. And there's this saying that the athletes will die for points at the CrossFit Games. That might not be the event to do it on, depending on who you are.
Oh no, 100%. That is not the event to do it on. So
Let's go to number 4. Number 4 is the only athlete on the list that had an asterisk next to it by the time we did this. This is Alex Kazan. She's had to obviously pull out of the CrossFit Games. I'm not sure what she's going to be capable of doing for WFP and then going forward with competitions like Rogue and the WFP finals. But I didn't want to pull her off the list because she's been so good this year. She could arguably be number 2 or 3 on this list, if not for the car accident, maybe. And so let's wait and see what happens in her recovery with that. But up to this point this season, Alex has been phenomenal, and I think everybody is hoping that she's able to get back and compete at that level again soon.
100%. Yeah. So that was a hard decision for her to do. A very mature decision too, but I'm not surprised. I'm sure, like I said, Justin wouldn't throw her out on that competition floor unless she was able to compete at the level that she wanted to. She wasn't going to go there and just fucking go through the motions. It's not worth it to her. But she will be in.
And well, she's slated to be in Mesa, but if we're being realistic, it may not be in the best interest to do that one either. She's already racked up the maximum points from the first stop. She still has 1,000 points left at the last stop. She's probably can maintain a pro card even if she skips Mesa. Everyone hopes that she's there, but let's see what happens.
100%.
An athlete who was, pretty much in that situation last year that is in a totally different situation this year is Lucy Campbell. She comes in number 3 here. Her credentials speak for themselves. I think that we're all still wondering just how good she can eventually be. She's just continued to impress, and I didn't see any way to omit her from the top 5.
It's it's kind of a wait and see. Last time she was at the games, she won 2 events. So I'm excited to see her back at the games. I'm excited to see what she does at WFP after the games. I mean, there's probably no tougher athlete out there, in my opinion. And I think her toughness is kind of is why she deserves this rank this high, especially for one who hasn't really done it at the biggest stage. Yeah, I mean,
but she showed up and done well at every stage on the way back. And I don't really doubt that she's going to be able to perform at the CrossFit Games. She's her shirt. I actually bought her athlete shirt this year for the games because I thought it was kind of the best personification of who she is and the journey that she's been on. And it also just applies to what life is all about, is finding a way to get it done. And that's what Lucy has shown through example over the last 3 years.
Yeah, I agree.
I know that there's a little bit of controversy about Laura Horvath in general. I don't know if it's related to her performance in WFP or the stuff off the field of play, but at the end of the day, I think Laura is the second fittest woman that we've ever seen do this sport. I still think she's the second fittest human on the planet. Yes, she's not doing the CrossFit Games this year. If that removes her from contention for you, that's totally fine. That's not what this list is about. let's see how the WFP season plays out. I would say, what happened to her on event 1 in Indianapolis, unusual. What happened to her in event 6 to me was a little bit disappointing because it looked like she sort of gave up on that lunge. But she's got 2 more opportunities to rebound from that. You talk about tough athletes. I think she's one of those, and I think that we will continue to see the version of Laura that we're used to seeing over the next 2 tour stops there, and potentially also at Rogue if she ends up competing.
Hmm. And no surprise at number 1.
The undisputed best we've ever seen. Tia's still competing. She's going to hold this spot until someone beats her, and that hasn't happened yet. So, I mean, I think that more of the question after watching her at Torian, for me, the question is not if she'll win the CrossFit Games. It's in what fashion, by how much, with how many event wins, by how many points. I mean, it was just as impressive as anything else I've ever seen her do. She's still got it, and yeah, she's the one to beat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, I don't know. I'm very interested to see how she does. Like, I mean, is it? I mean, a lot of people are just complete thinking it's going to be dominant. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it might be dominant performance, but we will see. I'm very interested. Of course, I want it to be an exciting race for her and everyone else that's involved. But I really don't know. It's it's going to be fun no matter what, whether this is her last season or not. As I mean, I got. Do you think that she steps away after if she wins again?
I don't know. Tia's beating to her own drum, and she doesn't see any. I don't think she sees any need to tell people what she's going to do before she's ready to. And I'm not that interested in forecasting it. What I can say is she was insanely good at Rogue. She was absolutely left the other best athletes in Oceania in the dust. She, lost one workout, and even after losing that workout to Gracie Walton, she looked better coming across the finish line than Gracie did, who was completely blown out. And Maddie Sturt's very good, and it was a no contest. I just, based on what she's done the last couple of times she has taken the floor, I don't see anyone beating her. And my gut instinct tells me that she could win up to at least 10 CrossFit Games if she wants to at this point. But I don't know if she wants to. We've heard Matt and Rich, the other greats, talk about how difficult it is on the family, how difficult it is on the whole year to kind of have that thing looming. And she's obviously handled it very well for a long time, but she may just not want to anymore.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it'd be a shame. I think it's one of those things. I know, like Kate's in the comments. One of her their I'm sure one of their takes will be one of her hot takes was about Tia and her winning all the time, and they want to see a little bit more parity and stuff. But it's not Tia's responsibility to make it fair for everyone. It's everyone else's job. But I don't know. I think it's gonna be one of those things we won't fully appreciate it until she's gone.
Nap time for Caitlin. Let's go on to the men.
Okay, I'm trying to stall as much as I can here. Give me a second here.
Well, okay. Well, while you're doing that, I want to address a couple of questions from earlier in the show, SPM, because we didn't really talk about this. Brian, in the past, I think you said the power rankings were people who could win the games if it was tomorrow or something similar to that. Is that still what the power rankings are describing? Yeah, I mean, in the past, the CrossFit Games was the pinnacle event. It was the one and only thing that every athlete had on their calendar that they wanted to do and pursue and achieve. Obviously, that's still the case for many athletes. As we've talked about on the show, there's others who are no longer pursuing that as the sole interest in terms of competition. But yeah, in general, you could say if all of these athletes or all of the athletes in the world were actually going to partake in a 3 to 4 day competition with 10 to 12 workouts that were fairly well balanced in terms of what we generally test for, this is how I think that they would stack up against each other. We've never had a competition like this with 100 or more of the best in the world competing at it. In 2019, we know that that wasn't the case, even though we had numbers that we were drawing from all different countries. And obviously we can see a majority of the athletes here are coming from the same countries over and over again. So that's the concept behind this. If they all competed in a serious live competition, how would they shake out? And this is more or less how I think they would do. Ryan asked, will your power rankings again after the games or Mesa, maybe the top 40? I've been trying to, and I mentioned this in the article that I wrote. Like, if you're looking for other ways to assess elite level fitness, Apollo's rankings are very good in terms of what they represent. I think the CrossFit Games worldwide ranking system has basically fallen off the map. The Mountain is a good snapshot of where the best of the best are at, that John does at various points throughout the season. It's not the depth of field that we're talking about here. In terms of the top 100, I don't like updating it more than maybe twice a year because I like to give all these athletes maybe a 6-month window to try and compete and see where they, kind of shuffle out. But a top 40, 50 could be kind of interesting because we will get multiple data points from a lot of these athletes just in August alone. So that might be fun to do maybe prior to Rogue or something like that, because then we'll also have Rogue. I don't know about Dubai and the WFP finals at the end of the year. That would be, pretty meaningful for those tops. So I kind of like the idea. Maybe I'll do it again. Was that good in terms of buying you time?
Nah, that's right. We're gonna go with it.
Okay. On the men's side, similar to the women, we're just going to pick a couple athletes in each tier to highlight. And in this bottom section, I wanted to mention a couple guys from Finland at 91 and 92 there, Tatu Ronhaimo and Sam Zerlik. If you watched Turku Tuomiopäivä, you'll definitely know who these guys are. And if you like watching the WFP, you'll get to see one of them there. Sam Zerlik did the qualifiers, and he posted on his social media that he's going to come over and actually do the competition, which is pretty cool. Sam's been at the semifinals previously, similar results to Siri Mesa, bottom 30 in the two that he's had an opportunity to do there. And otherwise, he's primarily competed in Finland. This was the best I've ever seen him look, and I'm excited to see him in an international competition. The winner of that competition was his training partner, Tatu Ronhaimo, who absolutely obliterated the field. It's an outlier performance relative to what we've seen, but he's, like we said with many of the women in this range, an athlete that I'm hoping branches out of Finland and starts competing more, because what he showed me there was very, very eye-catching, and I have rewarded it in terms of putting him on this list.
I do want to, give a shout out the athlete that broke 100 there. Gi Quan Yang from China. He's a guy I'm keeping an eye on. I think if he ends up doing what I expect him to, he could become like a huge athlete. I mean, if you think about it, as many people that are in China, and if you're the best at a particular sport in China, you're going to get millions and millions of followers. And he has that potential. I mean, he's young. He's only 22. He's coming off a podium finish at the Far East Throwdown. Now, granted, you put a barbell in his hand, just like, he's got a Olympic weightlifting background. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. If I'm a coach and I'm looking for an athlete, a raw athlete to work with, I'd be knocking at this door. If I'm any of these, if I'm Justin Kotler, if I'm HWPO, I'm looking up this guy right now. I'm like, okay, hey, it's almost kind of like a recruiting visit. I think he has it.
The one other guy I wanted to draw a little attention to here is at 85th, Jan Arndt Finkenberg. He's another guy that he hasn't maybe competed at the biggest stages or the most broadcast stages, but he's had sneaky good finishes. He was 6th at French Throwdown, 2nd Eurasia Throwdown, 15th at Dubai, 4th at German Throwdown in the last 8 months. So he's, all these competitions are in Europe and the Middle East. He had 62nd in the Open, which is pretty good. He's kind of a bigger guy. He is kind of in the program training camp that was just taking place last week down in Mallorca. So he's getting touches in training settings with guys like Luka Čukic and Nika Maizaradze and Jack Dahlstrom, Luka Vuniak, who are all, very competitive athletes. So I think Jan, it'll be interesting again to see where he's able to kind of get into some competitions, but good success this past 8 months lands him here in the top 100.
Moving on to the next 20.
Yeah, and there is this kind of interesting thing going on with some of the men, where, for example, we'll see Tola Maracanio here, and also Jacob Marlowe, guys who have some team competitions going on this year and some individual competitions going on this year. But I wanted to just give some credit to Jacob Marlowe. We talked about him after his performance at the TFX qualifying event, and how good he was there. He is a guy who does have some things that still hold him back from bumping up on this list, but his pure CrossFit, as Coach T would call it, is pretty impressive at this point. And I definitely want to give him some credit for that.
Anyone else on this list?
Let's see if I marked anyone down or if they're in this list here. Noah Wilson here at 78. I did get a couple of people saying this was too high for me to have him ranked after what he's done. We had him on last week as an interview after he won Metcon Rush. He's competing at Monster Games this upcoming weekend. We'll do the preview for that tomorrow. But him and Justin Johnson are there, 77, 78, young, good athletes out of the Southeast that I think are going to be rising through the ranks in North America. So, can mark those guys down and get to watch Noah this weekend as well.
We talked about the UK women a couple times, the young up and coming UK women. Talk about Tom Condon and what.
We mentioned the UK championships and Tom Kingdon success there. He was kind of battling with Reggie Vasa and actually Archie Reed, who I considered at the very bottom of this list as well as an up and coming young guy. Ultimately missed the podium there to Cian Dunphy, who's an interesting athlete, but. After Harry Lightfoot, I think Tom is probably the best one in the UK right now. He has popped up on the semifinal stage. He's competing in Europe primarily, but this is a group of athletes right here who, for the most part, have been around, and some of them are starting to, make those small steps up the ladder, so to speak. So I don't know what the ceiling is for Tom, but he's been impressive in the last year compared to his previous career.
Disregard this. I had this posted and then I realized I made a mistake, so I had to remove it down. But and I haven't been able to update it. But just disregard the top.
Okay. Yeah, these are obviously men's power rankings. But on this list, I wanted to narrow in on, let me find them on here, Enrico Zanoni at 57. Just such an interesting athlete to me. He obviously had the tremendous breakthrough performance at Lowlands Throwdowns in 2022 and sort of the predictable or usual middle to bottom 29th at the CrossFit Games that following season. He has not been able to make his way back since then, and his competition performances have been somewhat puzzling. 17th the next year in the European semifinals, which, that's the year prior to that when he took 5th and qualified, there were 4. So that would put him as like sort of or there were 2, which would put him in like the top 10. So, and things change year to year like that. So it wasn't that bad. Then he wins French Throwdown when it wasn't a semifinals. And he takes 17th at the Storm Games, which was like, why would he be taking 17th there? Barcelona last year, 17th again, just like not this great of a performance. 22nd in the semifinals in 2024. Decent finish at Wodapalooza this year, 13th. Good in the Open, good in the semifinals online, and he qualifies for the CrossFit Games for the second time in his career. But to me, I haven't seen Enrico Zanoni in live competition impress me since Lowlands, really. Like maybe Wodapalooza this year is the only other time that I would say I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw from Enrico on the field of play. And I'm pretty eager to see what he does at the games this year, considering that the qualification came online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't think he was a type of athlete that would do really good in online qualifiers, but maybe his fitness has changed, or I don't know who he's currently being coached by, or where he's been the last couple of years in terms of again, that's another comeback story, but granted, he's been around the space.
For us in the US, like he's very much a mystery. he doesn't do a ton of meaningful competitions that are showing up on the landmark of Western CrossFit. He doesn't post a ton about his coach or his training camp or whatever. He's just kind of doing his thing and waiting for the next opportunity. Now he has it. So, this is kind of similar to Syria Meha. She won the qualifier, and and I have her in the 50s range. He qualifies here, first time back in a few years. I have him in this 50 range. I'm waiting to see. And I think that he could potentially go up or down 20 spots on this list, depending on how he does at the CrossFit Games this year. Kind of surprised by Sterner's ranking. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I think George is still kind of working back towards his ceiling as he's building up some strength and competitive experience again. I think he's been pretty good so far, but still not as good as we'll hopefully see him be in the year to come.
So let's move on to.
No, let's say here one other guy on this list I did want to mention was Jack Farlow. Jack Farlow, I think he's actually higher ranked by maybe 10 spots or so on the Apollo rankings, because his competition history is like pretty good, but it also has these sort of fluctuations in it. I would say better than Zanoni. But to me, I feel very much that Farlow, like Emma Lawson, is trending in the right direction. He obviously he had a pretty compelling storyline at WFP Indy. He did compete at the semifinals of Mayhem Classic, where it's below average against a very strong field there. Top 10 at Wadapalooza. So it's been a pretty good year, and now he's made the pro division at WFP Mesa. So definitely has a chance to move up from here. I do think this year has generally been trending in the right direction for him, and I'm excited for the next couple of times we get him to compete. And maybe Lynn isn't watching right now, which is good for us.
Fixed it, by the way.
Nice.
Anyone else on this list?
Nah, I think it's okay. Let's move on.
Okay. Moving on. 21 through 40.
Yeah, let me just make sure he's in here. Yep. The next guy that I wanted to dial in on is Peter Ellis, sitting there at 36th, and amongst some pretty good athletes. Obviously, Nate Ackerman's been trending this year. Callum Clements has been having very consistent performances. Tudor Magda, Jack Rosema, some really good guys. And Pete Ellis, on the other hand, hasn't done, a ton of competitions. He did go to the games in 2024 where he was 31st. Similarly to the women's side in Oceania, maybe even more so in recent years, it's just really hard to crack into that top three when you have guys like Ricky and Jay and Bailey and some of the others who kind of come and go from the mix. But he's been very consistent there. 5th in 2023, 4th in 2024, 4th this year. Guimaeros was 3rd. Jay Crouch and Ricky Garrard, you're talking about top 15 guys in the world, and he's able to beat a pretty stout field and finish in the next game's qualifying spot there, or the first game's qualifying spot, I suppose. So I'm glad that the scenario worked out for Pete to get back to the games this year, because I was very impressed with what I saw in person from him. I was also impressed with the conversations I had with him and the demeanor. He seems to be one of these guys that can really flip the switch back and forth pretty quickly from joking, lighthearted, talking trash to now it's time to compete, and I'm going to do some pretty impressive stuff. For a smaller athlete, he actually reminds me in some ways, clearly not the same level, but of Austin Hatfield. He's a good runner. He's good with the barbell cycling. He's good with some of the gymnastics. He doesn't have the same top end strength that Hatfield has, which is what holds him back. But Pete Ellis, I'm excited for his second crack at the CrossFit Games and for the Western world to get to see him compete if they didn't watch Touring Pro.
Next list.
Yeah, inside the top. We're going to go inside the top 20 now, right?
Yeah. Well, 1 second.
I did like this comment from AHA. Colin Bossart is the joker on the men's side for me. I wouldn't be surprised if he does some impressive in some events. Yeah, I would say he's kind of similar to Mira, where he can have some top fives, he can have some bottom fives. He'll probably shake out in the middle of the games field. When we get into this list here, 6 through 20, I mean, we're actually going to talk about 8 and up all it as one collective group here at the end of the show. But a lot of the other guys getting a lot of, we kind of know about them. The two guys on this list that I really wanted to highlight are both from Europe, Moritz Wiebig and Harry Lightfoot. Moritz, I didn't know if he'd participate in the game season or not this year, but I think that he's found a really good peace with himself of competing for himself, despite how he may feel about any other things. And he's been awesome. First at the French Throws and second at Wildland Fest. So like Sung Young Choi, he technically qualified twice. He podiumed at Pixel Showdown earlier in the year. He didn't do great at Wadapalooza, I think, by his own standards. He took 16th. They also had a team competition there that was fun. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him at Dubai, but prior to that, he won the Belgrade Games. He won German Throwdown after withdrawing from last year's CrossFit Games. So for me, Moritz Wiebig he's a experienced athlete that I still think is in the prime of his career. And I think that he's going to show up and show out at the CrossFit Games and have his career best finish there. Anything you want to add about Moritz?
No, I mean, I feel like we talked about this the other day, or maybe I was talking with someone else. But I mean, this Moritz almost stepped away from CrossFit, from functional fitness. But he kind of found himself through competition, through the community. He seems like he's just in the right state of mind. I think him training with Luca and talking to Luca and then having John on the side, just that community and environment that's around. I think what we're having is he's going to come with no expectations. And I think that's why he's going to have a good performance, because he's coming in with zero expectations. Because even with his performances in semifinals where he's done really well, I think he's a smart enough man that he's like, I have not done it at the game, so I'm going to go there and have fun. He hasn't had fun at the game since he's been here, and it'll be. I think he's deserving that spot. I think he is gonna probably. He's that guy who I think can bust into the top 12. Could surprise someone, especially if it comes down to one event and everything's on the line. He's your clutch hitter.
Yeah, so excited for Moritz to see him in action. Harry Lightfoot, we put up a post after the UK Championships that's precluded him from being the King of England because he didn't show up for the UK Championships, but he is the only one of them that's competing at the CrossFit Games. Harry Lightfoot's definitely the fittest guy in the UK right now. I'm wondering if he might be the fittest guy in Europe right now. I'm pretty curious to see how he does at the games this year. Last year he took 21st. It is what it is. Qualified through the online portion, so we didn't see him at either Malaga or the French Throwdown. He also had a good open finish. But in the years prior to this, very impressive 8th place in the French Throwdown last year. He also competed at Wadapalooza this year and finished 7th. It's a pretty good finish for him. He won Strength and Depth in 2023, 12th at Wadapalooza in 2024. So he's been stringing together impressive performances. And I feel very similar about him as I do Amy Kringle, that the best is coming. I'm just not sure how good that is yet. And the men's field, especially at the games that he's competing against, is very different than the women's field that Amy's competing against. So a similarly good performance or improvement from both those athletes could result in different numbers on the leaderboard. Like Amy making another jump forward might yield her with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 at the games. And Harry Lightfoot making a jump forward might look like 10, 11, 12, 13 at the games, but it would be a similarly impressive performance. Anything you want to add about Harry before we move to the top guys?
Good kid. He's a big kid. I mean, if you meet the guy, he's your, he's the guy that he could be anyone's friend, and you want him to do well. You meet him as just a nice guy, nice kid, and I'm rooting for Harry. He comes in as one of the smaller athletes, kind of like Colin Bossard. He's coming in as one of the smaller athletes. But the thing is, he's almost like Moritz too, where he's so used to being an underdog. Brian, you've always underrated him. He's the type of guy that watches these type of stuff every time he's been to Wadapalooza, he's always gotten better. Every time we've seen him, he's gotten better, and I love it because he's good natured by it too. He understands sports. He um, understands that it takes a lot of hard work, and he has fun. It's good. It's good because I think him and Amy, they kind of balance each other out, and you know, and I think they've all both elevated. There's no surprise that the reason why those two athletes have done so well the last year and a half is because they've been training together. They both have made a commitment. Harry's moved away from his hometown, his small town. He stopped playing, rugby. Amy moved away from the Isle of Man to get away from Jake Chapman. And but yeah,
Yeah, this is AHA. This is totally fair. I think I
Mhm.
have actually Yella ranked as a top, but I think it's pretty volatile in Europe for who the best is there right now, and it's actually a pretty fun conversation to have. But as we push into this top group, I've been sort of teasing to it about throughout the episode, and just outside of the top 10, there are a bunch of people on this list. I had her on the almost in list, CJ. But there's a couple guys outside the top 10 here that are obviously not competing at the CrossFit Games. Vellner, Majeros, Hosta, Olsen, Quant, Jukic, etc. But 10 and up on this list are all competing everywhere this year. And I would say that Colton Mertens and Jay Crouch are just on the outside of the conversation of what I'm about to present. But starting with Roman, Justin, and Ricky there, and then pushing into the top 5, which I can't actually remember the order on here, but it's Adler, Sprague, Hatfield, Pepper, and Hopper in some order. These 8 guys, in my opinion, is as stacked of a top 8 that we've had in this sport on the men's side, maybe ever. You would have to go back probably to, I think when I was looking back at it, I went back to 2016 to find a top 10 on the men's side that I thought was a top 8, excuse me, that I thought was that well accomplished and impressive, like consistently for a period of time. That year was Matt Fraser, Ben Smith, Pat Vellner, Brent Fikowski, Cole Sager, Scott Patrick, Jacob Hepner, and PKG. And then maybe 2014, Froning, Fraser, Kalipa, Bridges, Panchik, Hackenbrook, Smith, and Noah Olsen in his first year. But that's like the caliber of top 8 that I think we have this year. And I just did a little pull with those guys. Of those 8 men, they've competed prior to this year 27 times at the CrossFit Games. They have 4 championships, 9 podiums, and 18 top 10 finishes. Combined, they've won 11 semifinals or regionals. They've podiumed 24 times at semis or regionals. They have 3 Rogue wins and 8 Rogue podiums, 3 Wadapalooza wins and 4 Wadapalooza podiums, 2 Dubai wins, 5 Dubai podiums, 2 Open wins, 14 Open top 10s, although 8 of them come from Adler and Pepper alone. And obviously, they had all top 10 finishes at WFP, swept the podium, and of course, Hatfield got the win there. It's a very, very stout group of 10. I think that the next however many days it is until the CrossFit Games, anyone who's doing a show previewing the CrossFit Games can spend the entirety of the show, if they wanted to, talking about how competitive this group of 8 men is. You could make compelling arguments for each one of them to podium this year. I think Amanda Harry, we were watching earlier, said maybe they can't all win, but they can all podium. And that's pretty fun to talk about. Personally, I do still think that Adler is the one to beat. I don't think that everyone agrees with me on that. I think Sprague has definitely shown his class over the past 3 major competitions that he's done healthy. I think Hatfield has shown the potential to be in the mix for that. And I think that Jason and Dallin want as bad as anyone to be someone who's considered to win the competition. But when I spoke to Ricky, he said, I don't care about anything else. I want to win the CrossFit Games. And I think that all 8 of those guys have that same mentality and the fitness to back it up. So I'm as excited for this group of men to compete throughout this season for those accolades, those honors, those championships, those podiums, those prize purses as I've been in a long time. Everybody knows how I feel about things that are not the athletes. But as far as the athletes go, especially on the men's side, to me, this next 6-month stretch of competition is as good of a 6-month stretch of competition that we've ever had in the sport.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Whether you're on the fence or hate the games or hate WFP or hate Rogue or hate freaking fitness in general. Um, you know, this next 6 months, like you said, it's going to be fun. If you're media or if you're a fan of the sport, it's going to be fun to watch, and it's giving you something to talk about, and that's sport related. And I think it's like if you had a chance to see, you know, Tiger Woods play, every freaking tournament, then you would love that opportunity. I regret not being able to see Michael Jordan play, but now we're in an aspect where these guys are going to be all around the world. Well, some of them will be. Well, they're going to be in Europe. They're going to be for Rogue and for WFP. I just think it's really cool. Like you said, the next 6 months, you're going to see fitness, especially on the men's side, at the highest level with these mixture. Man, it's amazing. My question for you: Do you think it's more? Do you think Jason, Down, or James are going to get caught up in, and even throw Justin in there, that they're trying to beat each other more than they're trying to beat Jeff or say Ricky? Or Austin? Or do you think there's too much of an inner battle between them?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you have some different sort of approaches to this year, I would say. And that group that you mentioned is obviously training their asses off, but they're also putting themselves up there in social media and investing a lot of time in that. And I think people are very appreciative of it. And on the flip side, you have sort of the silent assassins. You have Jeff Adler, Austin Hatfield, Roman Krennikov, and Ricky, I would say. Proven promotes him, but he doesn't do much self-promotion otherwise. That if they post anything, it's just very much business as usual and eyes on the prize. And I think that the fact that we have these two different groups of four men that are inside this collective kind of fatal eight at the top of the heap here is going to be interesting to see. For those that do have a chance to be in the back and watch how they interact, prepare, warm up for, and then come off of the field of play, you'll notice different sorts of demeanors amongst those guys. But once 3-2-1 goes, 3-2-1 go hits, all 8 of these guys go into a different zone. And I think that each of them is seasoned enough as a competitor and has shown the quality and the ability to podium at major competitions in their careers that they can dial in on what they need to do, especially at the start of the weekend, to keep themselves relevant. And then as the story starts to tell itself, especially come Sunday, they'll all also narrow their focus on the guys that they need to be critically aware of, depending on how they've done up to that point. I think that when you get to Sunday, you'll have still 5 of them that feel like they can take the podium, and 3 to 4 that still realistically can take the win. And then the ones that, for whatever reason, whether it's execution, this combination of workouts, the margins are small, but the things that are tested early in the week will sort of sift out where they sit going into that final day. They'll have to evaluate things a little bit differently. And those are the ones that maybe take a risk to try to put themselves back where they want to be. But that's the fun of actually like following it event by event, day by day, and seeing how it plays out.
Yeah, Sunday, it's going to come down to, it might be one of the times we've ever seen with these 8 athletes. And that's not counting. There's always going to be one athlete that just comes out of nowhere. Someone outside the top 10 that's going to put himself in position. But it's all going to come down to the margins of errors. Everything's execution, transitions, just stuff like that. Someone's going to lose it. Starting with that first event on Sunday, someone's going to lose the games in this group. There's going to be someone on the podium Sunday morning. The podium you have Sunday morning will not be the podium that you have at the end of the weekend. That's going to be my hot take. I know it's not much of one. That's shout out to Kate. But I think because, you figure it's going to be 3 events on Sunday, and, it's going to come down to fitness. It's going to come down to who's going to go out harder, who's going to go out faster, who's going to make those errors, who's going to not listen to their coach, or not take the advice of their coach or whatever. You're going to see the true professionals come out, and whoever wins this year's games certainly deserves the title of the fittest, probably since that era that you're talking about. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It's fun, and then also seeing these guys. Let's 2 weeks later run it back again, and just seeing how beat up their bodies are, and that's why they're professionals, I guess.
Yeah, long show today. These are stuff that Patrick and I have been working on for the last couple months, and kind of keeping tabs on the international field of athletes throughout our travels this past year. Obviously, everyone has their own opinions, their own favorites from their parts of the world. Maybe there's some new athletes popping up on this top 100s for you. But either way, we're entering into a part of the season that has a lot of big competitions coming up. It'll start with the games in a couple of weeks. And I think that, for men and women alike, there's a ton of opportunities. I don't think I'm going to do a specific show on the games rankings. They basically are, you could just pull them from here, find the 30 men and women competing at the games. That's the rankings that I would have for the CrossFit Games right now. But we will do a team show next week, previewing the team division, which I think is going to be pretty interesting to talk about. A lot of good athletes in there. And tomorrow we have Monster Games preview with Jason Ansley, the competition director of that competition, and one that we'll be live streaming this weekend.
Are we going to be really negative when we talk about teams next week?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you only talk about negatively about the games. So if we're gonna have a show about games teams,
I get it. You're being facetious.
No, I am. CJ, I want to bring up the CJ catching up, not putting Gucci in as criminal. Brian, if you don't mind, I'm gonna pull up the people that were outside the list.
Okay.
Just like I said, Brian before he would do 200, we cut it down to 100. I mean, we're going on a 2-hour show right now, and I haven't been fully engaged, so my bad on this. But it kind of shows you that there were some of the people that missed the list. Ariel Saunders, Ashley Coe, Dana Pran, Diana Pinchuk. Gucci's right there, Jessica Andrazik. For various reasons. So it's not like we don't know who they are, or he doesn't know who they are, or hasn't considered. It's just that there's certain things, but there is the honorable mention. You have a list down here of some other athletes who, for whatever reason, whether it be injury or just unknown about them, or if they're retired, that we have that on this list as well. So it's not like some of these So that's on the women's side: Nicole here, Lily Burkett, Kira Miller, Caitlin Saunders, Zoe Warren. I mean, it's an impressive list right there, and any of those could have made the top, the top 70, 80. But for there's something maybe just didn't have enough data on the men's side. Jake Douglas, Carl, our boy Carl. That's good. Con Porter. I remember Con was a tough one. We talked about Con the other day. Len Postal, Mascarelli, Lingol, Ben Wise, and then we go down to kind of the unknowns, due to injuries or taking a year off or whatever. We just don't know much about them. So, all that stuff's being considered. It's, so to kind of answer Wad Prep's questions, Gucci was considered, just, she didn't make it. Shout out to SPM. There you go.
Where do you rank on the list, Pool Boy? Yeah, I mean,
number one, if there's a
even if you were good enough to be on this list, you'd be in the red on the right with the people that are unable to compete currently. You take care of yourself, brother, and good luck in the Super Saiyan Monopoly matches.
Like Brian said, alluded to, and by the way, the post is up for the men's. If we go back here.
Yeah, I mean, last thing I want to say is really appreciate the interaction in the chat today. Obviously, this show is focused on the athletes, but it's difficult to talk about the athletes without being conscious of everything that's going on in the sport. I actually thought that for the most part, the conversation in the chat was fairly productive in terms of having that conversation that a lot of people are talking about. It's not an easy year for anyone. Some people might think that it's obvious what to do or what not to do, but everyone has different perspectives and places that they're coming from. we obviously also have opinions, but at the end of the day, we really respect the athletes, the coaches, the competition organizers, the camps. Um, and I do think that because there was conversation about it, that the sport is very powerful in terms of being a beacon of the methodology, and that's why we cover all these competitions. That's why we try to highlight all these athletes. Patrick and I are living it out in our own lives. We train, we try to eat fairly, well. We still enjoy life, but we're active, and the methodology is a part of who we are, and it's part of what we do for work. And I do appreciate those of you that are able to still keep that in mind, despite the things that I am not in favor of. So thanks for the constructive conversation and participating in this. Obviously, the rankings are out there. We're fairly resilient to criticism. So if you think someone's too high, too low, missing from the list, you want to give a shout out to your favorite athlete or training camp or whatever, please, put it in there. The athletes are motivated by it. They love the support, and we love to see it from you guys.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because yesterday, for those that know, Brian's downstairs from me. He's we're on our way, like I said, Thursday to go film Monster Games. But we went to my gym the other day. We got a workout at CrossFit Gambit, and as we're leaving, a guy who made his list, his 200 a year ago, Joel Laney, who's stepped away from competition, he stopped by. So it was really cool, like, to see Brian and him kind of interact. And Joel kind of even said, "It's like, hey, I'm cognizant of these lists, and it put a lot of pressure on me as an athlete, especially as a semifinal athlete, and but it's just really cool seeing that." And then yeah, so that's out. The article's up. I'll put the link to the article on there. Like Brian said, tomorrow we'll have Jason Ansley on to talk Monster Games. So that's exciting. I'm pretty pumped about it. And then Thursday, Kate and Mesa are back with episode, what is it, Kate? Episode 7? You make the 7. And in the box office tomorrow, they're back to the regular time on Thursday, 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern. And the topic is Hot or Not CrossFit Games. I wish I could lie and say that their guests were going to be James Sprague and Tia. How epic would that be? So that would be the topic of discussion. That'll be the topic of discussion. And then got some cool stuff planned with Games Week. Kate and Mesa, they're going to take the reins and cover the games. So they'll be providing some commentary and some analysis during the games weekend. And yeah, so shout out to HCR CBD for once again making this possible, giving us the ability to do this. It's something that, two guys who just like to talk CrossFit and talk functional fitness and talk everything that loves it. So shout out to him. Use friend 20 at checkout, get 20% off your order. Yeah. I don't know. Brian, got anything else to say?
Glad you could make the live, Jeff. And after Monster Games, I'll be in basically full prep mode for WSP, and trying to take a little bit of time off the road in the next couple months for just personal health reasons mostly.
But I will be, Jeffrey. I don't recall the last time I've seen you. So if you're there, give me a holler. I'll be there. I think I might be on a coach's pass, so should be fun. I'll be basically, my place is, since I've came back from Europe, my place has become my halfway house. I've been Airbnb my room out. Now Brian and I have a guest staying there for 2.5 weeks, preparing for the Masters game. So, Jeff, cool, nice. I wear an XL shirt, so if you give me an extra judges shirt, I'll trade you shirts. I got a B.Friendly shirt for you. Cool. Thanks for everyone for coming to chat. Again, thanks for just being engaging. It's fun always having you guys there, from Pool Boy to Jenny to, Peter made a surprise visit, so that's cool. So we know people are out there listening. Sometimes our words are misconstrued or whatever, but it's fine. We don't care. It's who we are. We say what's on our mind, and it's all good. Yeah. So Brian, say we go get a workout in, and then we got some McGurk's to eat tonight. Power rank. Power ranking of the steak last night, Tucker's.
Oh, it was good. Maybe 7.5 or 8 out of 10.
I mean, for the price.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all the fixings. So, yeah. So we'll see you all tomorrow. We are on tomorrow at what time tomorrow?
4 Central.
4 Central, and we'll be previewing really cool Monster Games lineup and some programming. And yeah, so thank you all for the show. Enjoy today. Be safe. Stay cool. And as always, be friendly, our friends.